Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Great Western. Today we're going to be discussing the Steve Miller Band song Kow Kow Calculator. What on earth is that song all about? Kow Kow Calculator was written around about 1967 or 1968 and first appeared on Brave New World, which is a really good album, one of the Steve Miller Band's earliest albums. There's a wonderful live rocked up version from, I don't know, maybe the 1980s on the Steve Miller Band Greatest Hits. And if you trawl around YouTube, you will find the 1974 Winterland gig, a black and white clip of Steve, an acoustic guitar, and he really delivers this song as a solo piece. What an unusual song. And in this short video I'm going to make the case and say that Kow Kow Calculator is about the US Secretary of Defense Robert Mcnamara. Now, I've trawled the internet, I've seen occasional debates, but I have not myself seen this theory espoused anywhere. So let's get straight into the lyrics. Kow Kow Calculator was a very smooth operator, had himself a pet alligator, kept it in a chrome elevator. Well, if you've ever seen pictures or video of Robert Mcnamara, you will see a very eloquent, well-dressed man with perfectly parted, slicked back hair. Always looked good in a suit and always spoke well. So I would say that Robert Mcnamara was a smooth operator. So I think even in the opening verse we are getting some clues as to the identity of this person. Something that's much more challenging is who is the pet alligator, and why is the pet alligator kept in a chrome elevator? The chrome elevator could show his rise to prominence through the Ford Motor Corporation, where he became the CEO and then of course became the Secretary of State of Defense. The pet alligator could be his own perhaps internal aggression that led to the escalation of the Vietnam War. And the Vietnam War is also central to this song. It would have been at its height in 1967-1968 when Steve Miller wrote this song. A lot of Americans were dying, many of them unwillingly, and it was an issue that almost split the United States. So is the pet alligator his aggression, or is the pet alligator possibly the second president under whom he served, LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson? So why could it be Lyndon Baines Johnson? Why could the pet alligator be him? Well, the second verse says, when the sun began to shine, the alligator come outside. Kow Kow played the chimes, and together they would go for a ride. Maybe the alligator is LBJ, and when the sun began to shine, which sounds hopeful, could be LBJ's Civil Rights Act and all the things that he did to bring much needed equality to a segregated, divided America in the 1960s. So the sun's shining, LBJ comes outside into prominence, and then Kow Kow plays the chimes. Perhaps he is beguiling LBJ with talk of the war in Vietnam, the domino theory. If Vietnam falls, all of Southeast Asia becomes communist. We have to escalate the war, Mr. President. And perhaps together they go for a ride, is the escalation of the war in Vietnam. In the third verse, I think the Vietnam War is absolutely central. As they travelled with a heavy load, they came across a dead horse at the side of the road, with two generals standing at each end, fighting over whose fault it had been. The Vietnam War is a heavy load on these two as they travel, and then they come across a dead horse. a lost cause by the side of the road, useless. And surely that's Steve Miller's view, and the view of many, many Americans on the Vietnam War. And then there are two generals standing at each end of this dead horse, fighting over whose fault it could be. Those two generals could be the two American generals who were tasked with overseeing the war in Vietnam. First, General Westmoreland, and then secondly, General Creighton Abrams. They could be seen as fighting over who's made a mess of this. That's a possibility. Or the two generals, one of them is just the Americans generally, and one of them is the North Vietnamese. Possibly General Giap, who at the time was thought to be behind the North Vietnamese escalation, although not necessarily, but that's another story. And then there's a little bridging verse here where Steve Miller says, and all that's left was this war. It's got to be Vietnam, hasn't it? And they couldn't get things back together like they were before, because America was now split. There were riots, protests, there were the whole civil rights explosion, Martin Luther King, terrible times for America. I won't bother with the chorus too much. It's basically turn on your love light, turn it on, let it shine inside your heart. Come on, Robert Mcnamara, show some peace, show some love, show some humanity, end this war. The next verse that I'd like to examine says this: so many times Kow Kow heard it said before, oh, don't, Lord, don't go near that door. The cause of our evil you'll uncover because of the misery you discover. I believe that verse says, Kow Kow, Robert Mcnamara, don't escalate the war in Vietnam. There was a lot of advice from LBJ's cabinet colleagues to say exactly that. The military were confident of victory. Robert Mcnamara was persuaded by the military, but essentially there were many people who thought the war was unwinnable, as was proved. So don't go near that door. Don't escalate in Southeast Asia. A message said to him many times before. The cause of our evil you'll uncover. The evil of human nature. Perhaps Steve Miller has a negative view of America. The evil of American society. Because of the misery you'll discover. Countless lives. 55,000 Americans perished in the Vietnam War. Some of them were draftees, didn't want to go. It's thought perhaps several million Vietnamese civilians and combatants died. Well, misery seeks its own company, Kow Kow had heard it said. Now he sits there crying with his hands across his head. Kow Kow Calculator, oh, a very smooth operator. That's the penultimate verse. Why is Kow Kow sitting there crying with his hands upon his head? Well, as the war escalated and as the war became more intractable, Robert Mcnamara harboured doubts, secret doubts at first, but he gradually became more public in those pronouncements. Although never, while in office, he was never very anti the war, but he knew it was going wrong, and that's why he's sitting there crying with his hands above his head, because he knew it had been a mistake. So what happened to Robert Mcnamara? Well, against his knowledge and possibly against his will, because he had no intention of speaking out clearly against Vietnam, but because LBJ could see his heart wasn't in it, he was promoted to be the president of the World Bank. So it was a sort of a backhanded compliment. It was a way of getting him out of the way. He was the only candidate that LBJ put forward, and he did go on in that role. In later years, he spoke more about his regrets about Vietnam. But I am certain that that is what this song is about, that Kow Kow Calculator is Robert Mcnamara. The dead horse is the Vietnam War. And Steve Miller makes a very helpful comment in this song, doesn't he? Turn on your love light and let it shine inside your heart. And I think that when we think about the wisdom of those words, we could all do the same thing, couldn't we? Thanks for watching. If you think the song is about something else, please comment below, and please also like and subscribe to Great Western. Thank you.